Okay, there we go. That took a while. Looks like it's all going now. Yeah. All right. Hello. Um, Today I'm going to be continuing on doing some of the Donkey Kong streams or comparisons. Um, Again, I'm going to start with the arcade version just to give a quick glance to get a baseline. And then once we have baseline, the objective is to go into some of the Ocean Software versions, which are PC or well, not PC, computer versions, I should say. I don't think personal computer is what PC stands for, but I believe it specifically is oriented to like IBM style Microsoft running computers. These are all computers that do not fall under that category. And as I mentioned last time, some of the computer ones take quite a bit longer to load, and that's because they're loading from tape. And so there are going to be a few of these that might take a while, and I'm not sure if all of them will work, so we will see about that. I need to actually, hold on. I need to grab, where did I put that document? It's not there. There's a document that I created for myself to help me get some of these running, because some of them are not easy to do so without a little bit of help. That's not good. Should be right on the desktop here, but it's not. Let me. It's gonna take me a second. I'm just gonna quickly try to get this working. Where is the search bar? It is not existent here. Dang it. I'm gonna have to switch this monitor for a second. Oh. Let's mute that. All right. Or at least turn the volume down. Don't need to hear myself. Okay, hold on. Here. There it is. Okay. Let's get this document open so that I have some information I can work with. And let's see if there's any versions I can't run as well, which I also took notes on. So with the Ocean Software version, Ocean Software games, we have the Amstrad CPC version, which did I get it working? Oh, I need to switch this back now. It's going to be annoying. Amstrad, yes, I did get the Amstrad one working. We also have the Commodore 64 version, which does work. I also have the MSX version, which is really slow to load, but it looks like it does work. And the ZX Spectrum version, it looks like I did find a way to get it to work. So all 4 of the Ocean Software versions should work. So when I looked at the documentation around like which Ocean Software versions existed, it appears that there may have been maybe another version for the ZX Spectrum, but I don't know if it's different or not from the one that they ended up releasing that was official. So I haven't got that one yet. So that's one of the ones I'm gonna have to look into. Let me just write that down as well. I'm just gonna give myself a note there. Okay, so that's yes. So it should be those 4, and if we have a lot of time left after we look at those 4, which we'll see because some of these are going to take quite a long time to load. Then I might also jump into some of the other Nintendo built versions. So first of all, let's get back into the Donkey Kong for the arcades here. So can I pause this if I open this up? Yes. Excuse me. While I'm paused here, so a few things to note that so far have been often missed in ports. Number one, the animations. Clearly, there's a lot more animations in the arcade version than in most of the ports, including this opening sequence. Lives, not in fact, most of the ports have not included Mario representation, like Mario sprite representation as the lives across the top here. And the how high can you get screen, which is going to show up in a second here, is another one. The blue barrels on this level is a common one to get missed. The animation of the fire, like most of the animations. And then on the most bad ports, the physics are very, very off. In some cases, there are no physics. In other cases, the physics just feel completely different. So far, almost every version, if not every version I've run into, has had the wall bounce, which like isn't a feature that I thought I even knew existed until I started to do this. So that's kind of crazy. I didn't really expect that. Then we have some versions have really bad collision detection compared to this version. And I think that the reason for that is that the way that the collision detection works in this game, I think, is a two-piece collision. I think that Mario has a collision box for detecting terrain, and he has another collision detection for interacting with items. And I believe that the interaction with items is based on a point detection instead of a collision box detection. And so it's if another collision box overlaps that point, then it's considered a hit, which is why if he's up a little bit from the ground, then he doesn't get hit. And if he's bouncing up through the upper platform, but he's not like fully on the top level, then he doesn't get hit. Whereas in some of the versions, it appears to be a hit box, which is why, and it appears that the hit box is the same as the collision detection for the ground. And that appears to be, that causes some problems with some of the ports. So let's take a look. Oh, and some of the levels are obviously not found in some of the ports, but in most of the computer ports so far, it has included every level. Also, in at least one of the versions, the hammer has not worked. Oh, come on. There's no real warning to like the loss of the hammer, which kind of sucks. So in the arcade version, the blue barrels are what cause the fire to start coming out of the oil barrel at the back there. That is not the case in some of the ports. Some of the ports, it's just like the first barrel thrown, which is because they just haven't included the blue barrel in some versions. So as that second blue barrel goes down to the bottom there, you should see another, yeah, there we go, another fire jump out. This cutscene often gets missed, but not in every version that we've seen. This gets missed occasionally. Level size, it gets missed a lot, and also detail in the girders definitely also gets missed. In many of the versions that have less performance capabilities, console-wise, or computer-wise rather, like hardware-wise, oh, come on. This fire does not always act the same way. And in fact, I don't think anyone has perfectly replicated how the fire actually acts in this in terms of both movement, speed, and the AI for them. Because some of them will get the movement speed more or less correct, but then the AI doesn't really work in the same way, clearly. And others, the opposite. So yeah, that's one of the points that seems to be definitely a varying point for the ports. This animation most of the time does get shown. In fact, this is the only one that seems to get shown pretty much every time because it's so easy to reproduce. It's not always this quality where like Donkey Kong has separate sprite information. Sometimes they just turn his sprite upside down and throw him down. But it does seem to be the one that if they're going to include, that's the one they include. And I think it's because it's much easier to pull it off. This level in particular, especially on the on the console versions, they never get the full height. They tend to lose one girder and have Donkey Kong then appear on the right instead of the left side of the screen. A couple of the computer versions have had the same thing, just because it's less detailed if you can get all of the pixels in, and most of the computers at the time, I think most of the, like definitely the consoles, but I think also most of the computers at the time also expected a smaller resolution. Okay, for some reason, pretty much every single version has had this level in it, even though this is one of the more technically demanding levels I would expect. We'll do like one or two more of these to see if we can get all the way in. Okay, so this opening cutscene, definitely something to watch for with the ports. Lives. The sound reproduction also is a big one, especially that one, especially with the computer ports. They don't seem to get very good. Many of them don't have background music at all when you're playing the level. This one does. Sound effects are quite loud compared to the background music, which is something that I just think is a problem across many of the versions. Some of the versions are better than others. And I don't know if that's because they can't replicate the quality of the sound effects. Oh my god, this is such a bad setup. Let me go. There we go. I can't tell if it's a problem with the sound reproduction for the sound effects, or if it's a problem with the background music capabilities, like the RAM capabilities of like storing and playing music. A couple of the versions definitely they just couldn't store the music, or at least they like were not trying to, so they just didn't have the music at all. But in terms of like why they might have the sound effects, oh come on, the sound effects volume so loud compared to the background music, I think. This version does have the sound effects as about let's see, about 10 decibels louder than the background music, which is a fair bit louder, but like, what was it, I think it was the previous Commodore 64 version, that the sound effects were like 20 decibels louder, so you just could not hear the background music, basically, unless you'd really crank the volume, in which case, you're not going to hear much of anything, because it's going to be so loud. Oh my god, the barrels. I don't think any version has replicated the quality of, like, the depth of color data that this one has. In that, Donkey Kong here clearly has at least, I'd say, 4 colors. On this screen he has fewer. This one he has he has a light shading, a dark shading for his brown area, which I think is the same as the light shading for his normal area. Then he has white, and then transparent layer. So that's 3 colors and a transparency, which is 4 colors. Oh my god. With the fire there, it looks like it's another 4 color. It's got white, or yellow, red. I think white, yellow, red, and clear, or transparent, rather. Yeah, it looks like white, yellow, red, and transparent. Barrels have 3 colors and a transparency as well. Oh, come on. Mario, like basically everything has at least 3 colors and a transparency, and there's multiple different objects that have those color variations. So like the blue barrel has 3 colors at least that are separate from the colors that like there's one of the blues is shared between all of the barrels, but not every barrel is, or I guess it is blue and white, so maybe it is. But like the color of blue that Mario is looks like to me it's a darker shade of blue. And it's the same color as the boots on Paulina here, and the oil barrel. I think it's a different color blue. But here you can see there's like a white and a blue, and that blue looks to me different from Mario, although it could just be because it's sandwiched between the white layers. Yeah. Anyways, the color reproduction on most of the other versions is definitely a lot worse, and they definitely like cut down on the number of colors used and the number of shades used per object. Many of them will, like for example with the umbrella, only have a transparent layer and pink rather than also having the white in there. The hammers generally are like 1 or 2 colors maximum, whereas this one looks like it's got a handle color, a highlight color, and a actual hammerhead color, which is again, it's a 4 color sprite, although the transparency takes up one of the colors, so which is the same as what the NES is capable of, I believe, is also 4 color sprites, but that has not been used. I mean, but then there's also like the number of colors you can have on screen at a time, which is like a different problem, and that seems to be much lower with most of the ports that we've seen so far. So we'll see how that continues today. Anyways, so that's enough of the arcade version to get a baseline in, so let's take a look at one of these Ocean Software ports. We'll go to computer. And actually, before we get into the Ocean Software port, let's take a look at the other Commodore 64 version we saw. Let's see if I can find out which one it is. Was it this one? No, that's the Ocean Software version. This was the one we looked at. Oh wait, it's through this version maybe? Okay, yes. Okay, this is the Atari built version. Hopefully this didn't just crash. No, it looks like it's still going. I don't know if it's supposed to be. Hold on, let's see if I can get. Wait, NTSC is more accurate. No. That looks. This looks probably more accurate. Let's just see. Yeah. That looks weird. That looks weird. Oh, come on, I want to see. That's a CRT setting. Okay, so this is probably as close as we're getting. All right, so Mario moves a lot slower in this version. So this is the version we looked at last time. This is the Atari the Atari version that they built for Commodore. You can see here very clearly, color palette wise, it's actually not super far off. They don't, for some reason they color the blue barrels yellow and blue, even though they have a white accessible to them. And white seems to be what they used in the original version. They did put in the full number of girders. Let's see what else we can see here. And they got the cutscene in here, which is also pretty impressive. Mario moves really slowly by comparison, but he does have pretty good physics. The Commodore 64 is definitely like pretty good in terms of its processing capabilities compared to some of these other computers, or at least like the port feels that way. Hold on a second. Yes. It does have like a completely different hue, and I think that's just the color reproduction of the computer may have been not there, or maybe the palette that they had to use was not quite there. This feels a lot more squashed than the true version, but they did even get in like the sprites for Mario's lives at the top. There's definitely less detail in everything, but as a whole, this is one of the best ports I think that they had at the time, based on the stuff we've seen so far. The color of that umbrella is completely off. I think this one also has problems with the collision detection for the hammer. I think this was one of the versions where you could still get hit if you ran into something with the hammer, but the hammer was up instead of down, which I think in the arcade version is not the case from what I've played. I don't think you can like screw up hitting something with the hammer as long as you're coming at it and you're holding the hammer and you just kill the thing. So I don't know why that isn't the case with some of these. That was very close. Alright, so it does have this cutscene, but again, they took out some of the animation. They just flipped the sprite around and have him drop. So it's pretty basic, but it's actually really overall quite faithful. It's just that like the graphic quality is definitely a lot lower. The sound effects are, I would say, like muddier sounding, if anything. Like it just sounds like it's not far off in terms of tone. Like some of them have been really tonally wrong. This one, the tone is relatively good. And it's got like almost everything in it. It's just not visually quite there. Like the graphics are like a little bit not as high fidelity. The audio is not as high fidelity. So it just feels like overall, it's like if you took the whole, if it was like an image, it would be the equivalent of like taking the whole image and just like scaling it down and crushing some of that data out. That's kind of what this feels like. So it's actually a pretty good representation of the game. It's just not as good. It feels like a crushed version of it, which is pretty good. So let's now look at Ocean Software's version to compare. So we're still in here. We're going to now use a tape version, or a floppy disk. See if this works. Need to reset. Oh, reset and detach cartridge. I need to mount. No, I need to. What is it called? We're going to mount the floppy, and then I think I have to type ready. I think I have to type load. Hold on. Should say ready, okay, and then run. There we go. This screen seems to be messed up. I think it's the ROM, or like the port. Whoever got this one, that screen is pretty messed up. I wonder if this is a different. Oops. Nope. I didn't want to be doing that. Can I stop doing this, please? F to clear all. Come on. Okay, well, I'm just gonna screw this up badly and then redo it. So right, left, down, up, fire 1, 2, 3, paddle button, mod 1, mod 2. Okay. That wasn't what I wanted to go into. What I wanted to go into is it looks like maybe, oh, these don't affect scaling in that way. That's interesting. Now this looks more accurate, maybe. Yeah, I think the normal is actually more accurate on this version. It's hard to tell. Some of these are one way, some of these are the other. Ah, that looks better. So this is Ocean Software, as you can see here. The screen here has a little bit less detail. So let's see how this goes. Oh, do I have to change joysticks? Yes. Ooh, that sounds a bit loud. Maybe? How is the loudness here? Actually, it looks like on the OBS that the sound is not that bad. Okay. It just stopped. Which one did I load? I loaded this one from... Oh, I should probably load the other one, actually. Hold on. I'm gonna reset. I'm gonna load from here because... Oh, no. Oh, it doesn't have that one. Oh, interesting. Reset and detach cartridge. That should have been the right one. Floppy, this one. Okay, interesting. Nope, I have to use that one. I should have unpacked it from the zip file because I think it's just it's gonna have some problems with the zip, but we'll see. Okay, this screen's messed up again, but that's fine. Okay. Please start this time. Going to start. Hopefully. I'll wait for a bit and see if it starts doing something. Might not like this. I might have to go back and change the file type in a bit. Like the core is not, or the hardware is not frozen, but this might be. I might need to unpack that. That sucks. Let's try to reset again. Let's go load. Oops. Okay. Try it one more time. We can also just wait here for a second and see how it, like, see what information we can get from the screen that starts up the game here. So let's just do that first, because I'm not sure how this is going to work. There we go. It did have the little flashing screen there for a second, which is also not included in all of them, but seems to be in the arcade version. Okay, so let's press fire. Let's see if it loads. It doesn't seem to be wanting to so far. But they definitely have a very different sprite palette. Come on. Let me play this. It might not let me. I mean, we can gather a few things just from this this image here. We can see that the girders are actually more detailed, more close to the actual version where it has a two-tone effect. The sprites for the characters are definitely very different. Donkey Kong himself has no white in his eyes. It looks like they chose a different color for the dark of his eyes for some reason. I'm not sure why that would be. Unless it only has 3 tones for the sprite, but it looks like Pauline has 4 colors. So I'm not really sure why they did that. But it does look like I can't load this version right now. So we'll have to come back to this one, unfortunately. Let's take a look at... Oh, the Amstrad one's hard to load, but I will try to do that one. Okay, Amstrad. Let's see what my instructions for myself are here. So we need to mount this one. And then I should be able to go. What is the combination of buttons I have to run? Oh, run. And then a quotation mark, which has a weird way to access. Which one is it? Not these, not those. Should have given that as a thing to write down for myself. There it is. It's on the number 2. Run, and I think it's donkey. Enter. Okay. Hopefully it's doing something. Yep. There seems to be something going on. All right. Here we go. Ocean Software Limited. Donkey Kong, copyright Nintendo. So this is the official version. I don't know why it says the master, but all right. Let's just see what my buttons are. Right, left, down, up. Fire 1, fire 2, fire 3. No, okay. Okay, that's super loud. Let's turn that way down. That's still loud. That's better. Okay. That was brutal. Interesting. So this one has that weird artifacting thing that a couple of the other versions have had. Whoa, the physics on that is weird. Where when a sprite moves over another sprite, it has like a weird, it doesn't blend them very well. So you can see like, as I walk past this ladder, that Mario has like a weird coloration thing that happens to him. Ah, the hammer doesn't come down right away. So the colors on this are really odd. Some of them are pretty good. Other ones are terrible. Mario jumps through the platform, so I bet this is a version where I could kill myself by jumping into something on top, unfortunately. The sound effects are not bad. It's not quite right, but it's not that far off. Graphically, the sprites are not there for sure. Like the oil barrel, you can barely read oil on it, if you can even read that. Mario has a very different look to him. I think that the sprites are a little bit narrower on this version. So because of that, I think they didn't have Mario's feet kick out quite as far when he jumps. And everything's a little bit squashed, but we can try to fix some of that. Let's see. Video. We can change coloring to weird things. No, I don't think there's one that's better than the normal. So this is pretty much what we got. So yeah, Mario, I can't tell if his jumps are physics-based or not. He does have the wall bounce. It's not a great wall bounce. Oh, come on. It's like a single bounce. Okay, let's start again. But we do have this animation, which is pretty good. It seems like most of the computer ports are able to get all of the animations in, which is interesting. It seems like Coleco might have had a harder time with that. But it's at the quality sacrifice of the actual sprite fidelity, so that's kind of an interesting distinction. There are blue barrels in this one, it looks like. That first barrel that went down was a different color. So that's cool. Oh, that hit me? So this is clearly a collision box detection one, which sucks. So let's see. Oh, you restarted your computer? Okay. Yeah, the sound on this one's weird. the base in a lot of the computers is really weird. Like this one, as you can tell, it's like very crunchy, I would say. Okay, let's get up there. Oh, we have this animation as well. Oh, and they get a broken heart in, which isn't in all of them. You wanted to ask if I... oh, if each of one of these was... Yes. So, yeah, basically they'd have to fully remake them for each system. Like, the companies would have had... So, like, there are 4 main companies that made ports of Donkey Kong. You have Nintendo, Ocean Software, Atari, and Coleco. So each one of those companies would have had, like, their own code that they would have wrote for each of these. Some of these would have been written in similar coding languages, if not the same coding language, although most of them are, like, very proprietary. Like, most of the computers, especially, had their own, oh, did the ladders not move in this one? Interesting. Oh no, there it is. It's moving now. Oh, come on. So most of the computers had their own coding languages. Like each one of these had its own kind of version of BASIC, effectively, or its own coding language completely. So that means that yes, basically each version would have had to be hand coded, but the ones made by the same companies theoretically would have had the code bases to reference from each other. They also would have had like the artwork that they could theoretically have tried to port over, although the graphic capabilities of each of these was so vastly different, they probably had to rebuild everything from scratch every single time. So yeah, like that's why I check the physics on each of them, because they all feel very, very different. Some of them, it's clear that the ones made by the same company, when they're made for different computers, if they've made the physics completely differently on a different computer, then you know it's got to be like the limitation of the computer to being able to do some of those things, right? So in this one, it feels like the jump has a proper physics-based arc, whereas like the 2600 definitely doesn't. It's just like a snap. And there's a couple of other examples of that, but the physics in this one does feel very different from the physics in some of the other ones. Like the jump is just a little bit different, and collision detection wise, they're very different across every version. Like some of them, it seems like they don't have enough, or like they don't have the capabilities to do multiple collision boxes, and other ones it feels like they can, and it seems to be pretty inconsistent as to when. Can I hit that? Okay, I'm gonna stand here. I want to see if I can jump into one. Okay, I can. So this one's a collision box, I believe. In the arcade version, I don't think I can kill myself by jumping up into an object from the floor above, and I don't know if that's a spacing thing or if that's a collision detection thing. But definitely, yes. There are, like, you can tell that each one of these was coded separately because they all feel very different from one another. And they all have very different, like, like everything. The one sprite that seems relatively consistent is that how high can you get screen, and I think that's because that's just a static image. It's not like a sprite, or like it is a sprite, but it's like one giant sprite for the whole screen, which is usually like compiled differently. It's compiled as like an image, like this one, for example, rather than like a sprite sheet that is drawing from, or like a character reference sheet, which is how some of these computers work. So because of that, the one image that looks relatively intact in every version, if they have the screen, is that how high can you get screen. But not every version has the how high can you get screen. And I think that the how high can you get screen is probably a pretty good reference of like whether or not there's just enough graphic capability to do certain things, because this graphic is not used anywhere else. So because of that, I think if you see that included, it's probably more likely that they have the RAM capabilities to hold in a larger image than in some of the versions. Now let's see if we can get to the ladder in time. Hooray. So this is the one level that's not always in every version. So we'll see if they have the other level. Okay, they do. They have this level. Oh, interesting. Can I pause this at all? Is there a pause button? Can I? Nope. That's not gonna work. I have no idea. So I can't really stop this. But what I was gonna say is this version seems to go in the order of the levels. It doesn't seem to go in the order of the arcade version where it like does one level and then one and then it does level 1 then 4, then level 1 then 2 then 4, then level 1 then 3 then 4, and then level 1 2 3 4. This one looks like it's going all the way through 1 2 3 4 in a row, which is not bad in my opinion because you actually get a play like for a console version. I would actually prefer that, so you can actually get to see each level. In the arcade, I think they did it the other way around because not giving you each level every time will throw you off in terms of being able to be prepared, and that's better for like getting quarters. But I think for like a console version, you'd probably want to have the players be able to see all versions. So here now we get to see the last level. And it's pretty accurate in terms of like how much is on screen, and it even has the correct sort of reference for the sprites for the fire. Everything's very squished down in terms of the pixel density, though. It feels like I'd say it feels like everything has half the number of pixels it should. But it does at least get everything on screen, and it's readable. Like you can understand what each object is and how it's supposed to be representing the actual objects in the game. So that's pretty good. Go over here. We got the tissue box. Oh, no, no. The flames are so annoying. But this does feel like the AI is more similar to the one in the actual arcade game, although they are faster than they should be, I think, which makes it much harder. A lot of the console versions seem to get the movement speed of things quite wrong, which is odd. Like in this one, I'd say that the fire definitely feels a bit faster than it should be, and Mario definitely feels slower. Or, yeah, both actually, definitely. Look how fast that fire moved. That's crazy. Like, that's way too fast. And, like, inconsistent, too. Like, that, once one of them moved down the ladder at, like, a slower speed, and that mountain just, like, shot down the ladder. So, like, there's some inconsistency in that movement. But it played the full animation there as well with the little, like, thing above the head. That's pretty good. What else do I need to check? Oh, falling damage, if it exists, I'm sure it does. Although one of the versions just stopped you from being able to fall off a ledge, but let's check. Okay, falling damage happens, and you even have the little dust cloud shoot out, so pretty close to accurate there. So the biggest things with this version is that the coloration is quite off, and the sprites are lacking some detail, but otherwise this is a pretty good version, and I also do like that it shows you the full set of levels from the start, rather than doing a weird setup back and forth, which is what the arcade version does and several of the other versions do. But the fact that it has every level in it, the fact that it has all of the levels representing the arcade version, like pretty much 100%, pretty good. So I think that's enough for the Amstrad CPC version. Let's see what this thing says about it. Says it's a very faithful port, but the sound is slightly off. Yeah, I agree. Enemies do not turn blue when Mario holds a hammer. Oh, okay. Not a huge deal in my opinion. If you had to cut one thing in order to save some space, I think that's probably a better option than some of the other things. Donkey Kong is not moved by the conveyors in the 50-meter section. Okay. In 75 meters, Donkey Kong is not animated. Oh, okay. That's weird. Why would he not be animated? Because, like, if he's animated in every other version, it just doesn't really make sense. Anyways, that's kind of it. So I mean, it is a pretty good port. Definitely, the thing they don't mention in there is that all the scale of all the sprites is definitely a lot lower, um, in terms of detail and stuff like that. So that's the first one from Ocean Software that we could see. The Commodore 64 version we only got a glimpse of. I'll have to find a better version of it, or at least find a way to get that version of it running better in the future. Let's move over to the MSX version. This one I think is the one that takes forever to load. Hopefully it also isn't super loud. Okay, how do I do this? I need to, is it a tape input? This one. And then I need to type in. Oh, come on. Show up. Okay. Run this thing. Cas for cassette. Then quote. And then enter. And there's going to be a tape loading sound. It's going to be awful. But it's kind of interesting. Found Kong, great. That tape sound effect. I wonder if there's a speed up tape mode in this one. No, it doesn't look like it. So we just gotta wait on the loading of the tape. So the way that the tapes worked, if you didn't know, which is pretty cool, this sound that you're hearing right now is the game data stored in sound. So like how a phone works, sort of, or like used to work, like a landline works. It's literally putting code in the wavelength, and then the tape deck would listen to that sound effects and turn that sound into bytes, basically, into like data, bit data, and then turn that into code. So you're literally listening to the code right now. So I think that's pretty sweet. Now this one says it's ERBE software, but I believe this is still Ocean Software. It might just have a different name for this version for some reason. Although this might be a different company. Okay, come on. This takes a long time, unfortunately. This is the downside of tape audio, is that it has to listen for the whole thing and load it into RAM so that it can then process it and show it to you. So you unfortunately have to wait for it to play through all of the music or the sound. I can maybe turn this down a little here. All right, there you go. That should hopefully be better for you. Sorry about that. It's not. Yeah, so it's just when you first load the software, it's currently taking all of the sound and loading it all into RAM to like go, okay, here's all the code, let's write it all out and then compile it basically and run it. So yeah, it's yes, it should only happen at the start. It does take forever. So sorry about that. The ZX Spectrum will also be a tape version and will have the same thing, but the person who wrote the core emulation for it actually put in like a super speed tape read for that version, which is great. I hope that at some point in the future the MiSTer community does that for this version, because the MSX takes so long. But yeah. So this is a ROM of the tape played on effectively real hardware, because the MiSTer that I'm using, it is a hardware emulator. It's an FPGA, so it's a programmable CPU, and somebody has programmed the CPU core to represent how the CPU core of the actual hardware work. So it thinks it's the computer. It doesn't act as as a software emulation. It actually believes it's a computer. Okay, here we go. So can you imagine if this was like how you had to play games all the time? Like that, this was your experience loading games. You would just put in a tape, wait for however many minutes that was to load your game. And this is like not even like a crazy game, right? Like this is pretty basic. So that's pretty crazy. Now I think, can I remember if this version can use a joystick or not? I'm gonna use keyboard first because I'm not sure if I can use a joystick and I don't want to have to restart that whole loading process. So I'm gonna go one player, keyboard, and start game. Too loud. Let me turn the core volume down. Okay, it should be at 2 down. Okay. So this version, the sound is pretty off. Let's see, what are my movements? So that's jump. Okay. The tone is really off. What is move? Oh, hold on, I found a key. That was L? So all of these computers also had like wacky keyboards. Had really wacky keyboards, so they don't map 100% to a modern keyboard, which is problematic. Enter your key 4 left. Okay, let's put D. Oh shit, I did it reversed. Okay, D, G, F, R, I guess, and then jump is space. All right, that's not correct, but that's all right. So let's go 0 to start. Yeah, the Kong face is pretty messed up. The one that was really crazy, I played last time. It's like the scariest looking Kong ever. This one is just kind of like weird. Oh, okay. So the movements of the motion actually feels quite good on this one, which is interesting. Although the keyboard is not ideal for this, or at least my keyboard is not ideal for this. I really would like to try a joystick after this, but I'm worried. One of the versions I tried to use a joystick version for, but I think it doesn't work well with my, oh, it's got shitty collision, damn it. It's collision box detection for sure. So one of the other versions, it doesn't like an Xbox controller. I think because Xbox controllers have a constant firing joystick to let you know where the position track of the joystick is. And like modern computers handle that just fine because they just use that data to get 0. Come on, go up. To figure out what 0 is. Of the joystick, but that version clearly did not like that data. So whatever, however little amount of data was being pushed through the joystick was enough to make it just so that Mario constantly ran to the left. So that didn't work too well. These controls are terrible though. I need to try the joystick. We'll see how this goes. Please don't make me restart. Okay, actually no, because if I die, it seems to let me go back to this screen, so it should be okay. All right, let's try. Hopefully it lets me use my controller here, because it feels like it needs it. The small keyboard that I use for this is just not ideal for especially that setup. I should have shifted the keys over, which I'll do afterwards if this doesn't work. Oh no, that feels way better. Okay. So, Mario's jump does feel like it's an arc. Ooh, this is a version that does not have the wall jump. So there's a test that works. The graphics quality of this is like way closer to the Atari 2600 version. It's really not great. This is definitely one of the ugliest ones we've seen so far today. It is the ugliest, I would say. It is very clearly like 2600 level, like it's very much lower than the other stuff we've seen. It does have some of the animations in it, which is pretty good, but the sprite quality is like maybe 3 colors. I guess Mario actually has 4 colors to him, but everything else is like 1. So I bet in order to get Mario to be the number of colors it is, that's a combination of several sprites. That's my bet, because every single other sprite on the screen is like basically 1 color. And so like Pauline has a different colored boots, but it looks like they just put like Pauline and this girder here. It looks like basically the background is like they set up a white layer and then they just colored bars at certain heights, which is kind of interesting. So you can see like the pink that goes across these middle ones bleeds a little bit into the ladders if the ladders are within that like height range. So the only real sprites, it looks like, are Mario and then like the few moving objects. But yeah, it looks like Mario's sprites are the only set that have like a true overlaying color. So they may be using most of their sprite data on the Mario to have it have multiple colors like that. Because every single other sprite that I'm seeing on screen, anything that's in motion, 1 color. So that's interesting. This version is definitely hard. Any of these versions that have like a collision box detection suck in terms of like playability. They just are way harder. Oh my god. So like, because they're way less forgiving, and Mario's jump in this is very low, so he falls very fast. Is he even doing a full arc? Okay, so his hat is about a pixel above there. It's still about a pixel above there. I think that this is not a true arc. I think it's just placing Mario at a certain height and then dropping it back down. Oh, come on. So this is another one of the ones that are the hammer collision also sucks, clearly. The music is so off. It's interesting too, they have 2 different versions of Donkey Kong, so it looks like they can only have 1 detailed sprite on screen. So maybe they can have a 4-color sprite, but only 1. So for when Donkey Kong's on screen for that cutscene, he has 4 colors, but as soon as he becomes kind of more of a background object, he turns into 1 color, and Mario becomes the only thing on screen with multiple colors. So that's an interesting change. We also are missing the Mario life sprites. They just instead have like a single one and a number, which is not a bad way to do it. Most of the other ones just had like a number. They don't even have like a number and like sometimes text. Wow, but yeah, the collision detection on this one, and because the physics are so quick in terms of the movement, it's actually a way harder version than some of the other ones we've looked at. And like many of these versions are harder than the arcade version, which to me is odd. Although I guess it's their way of like trying to get more money out of the game so that people who are spending the however many dollars on these games, which would have been expensive at the time, probably like the equivalent of maybe $60 today, felt like they were getting their money's worth out of it. But we'll see. But I mean, yeah, it's interesting. So we have this bonus life, like basically all the data is there. The height of the level is full height, it looks like, but the sprites are really oddly sized. There's definitely a lot less detail in both the background detail and the sprites. The music is clearly quite off. Let's go. And the collision detection sucks. Oh, come on, like that. That's terrible. So in the arcade version, because it's like a point data on Mario, you have like 4 or so pixels that you can actually hit something in terms of like the Mario sprite without it actually killing you. This one, even if you miss it from the sprite-wise, because it's just a simple box collision, if your box hits their box, then you're dead, which is what happened in that one. Aw. And because the fall is so fast, it's very, very hard. Like, you have a very, very short window to jump over anything in this version. It's safer to use the ladders to kind of escape from things, except that, like all versions, you can have something come down a ladder like that, and then it just kills you, so there's not really anything, like a way around that. I really want to just get past a level here. I'm going to keep playing this for a little bit to see if I can get past a level, because this is really tough. This is definitely the hardest one today, mostly because the physics are just not good. I mean, responsiveness-wise, this is actually quite responsive. I'm surprised at how responsive this one is for how bad the graphics are. But, like, it feels quite responsive, but there's problems because of the collision detection is the main problem. Like, it seems that the ladders are point data in terms of whether or not you can go up them. You have to be basically perfectly in the middle. There doesn't seem to be too much of a overlap area. But conversely, the barrels have a very large hitbox, like the full size of the object, and Mario has his full size of him as well as a hitbox. So it makes the game quite punishing, because it needs precise collision on the things that you don't want it to be precise on, and it has very imprecise collision on the things that you want it to be more precise about. So it's overall just a big challenge. Hopefully it comes down. Oh, and then I can't dodge that one because I'm too low. Yeah, so ladders aren't basically safe in this version. Probably a couple more times. We'll see if we can make it. I get to that like second level, and then I just can't get past that because Donkey Kong's throwing stuff way too quickly for the fact that the collision boxes are as big as they are. And also just like, one thing I don't like about these games generally is that there is so much randomness involved with whether or not you can really like succeed, because you just don't know if a barrel's gonna fall down a ladder or not, and whether or not it falls down a ladder, like right there, I didn't have enough time because of how fast they fall down the ladder. That's another thing. So I'll get back to the previous idea in a second, but oh, and there are two colors of barrels, so that's another interesting thing to note. There's a lot of versions that don't have both. In the arcade version and in most other well, not in most other versions. In the arcade version, the barrels move more slowly when they're falling down than in this version. So if you look at this version, the sprites move at a constant speed, whether they're moving horizontally or vertically. That is not the case for the arcade version. It's more fair to the player in the arcade version, in that when things are falling, you actually get a little bit more time so that you can anticipate, because that's the only thing you can really do. Because it's a random chance that something's going to come down on those ladders, you need to have enough tell to the player to be able to move out of the way. In this version, everything's moving at a constant rate, and because of that, the vertical spacing is very, very low. So you just don't, and you move slowly vertically. So the fact that the things move quickly down the ladder means you just don't have enough time to react. Well, what was I saying before? Talking about ladders, talking about precision. I can't remember what I was saying. But yeah, like basically, like this version is way, way harder than the arcade version because like that. Like, so the movement speed of those things is way faster. And because the distancing between things is so close together vertically, you just don't have enough reaction time for most of this. And oh yeah, and Donkey Kong, because of the fact that the collision boxes are as big as they are, and there's so little space for error in this version, they really should not have had, like, look how frequently Donkey Kong throws a barrel. It's like every 2 seconds he's throwing a new barrel. That is way higher of a rate than most of the other versions, which makes it, like, quite nearly impossible. Like, this is very, very challenging. I'm sure like a really good Donkey Kong player would probably be able to do this, not handedly, but pretty quickly. But like the safety ladders are basically pointless because the collision boxes are so big that like I bet you, yeah, like I bet you going up one of the ladders is not gonna even clear a barrel, which is true for some of these. Like I could go up here and a barrel could theoretically still come around and hit my leg and kill me. And I bet you this is one, yeah. So the fire just did that. So those ladders are actually just pointless in this version, which is like that. The whole point of those ladders was that they were like a safe place to be able to dodge stuff in the earlier version or in the arcade version. So the fact that those ladders do nothing except for like look interesting and kill you if you use them and be another point for like barrels to drop on you. Like this version is, and like there, look how slow you move up. So like this version is way more punishing and way harder than the arcade version, which you'd think should not be the case because the arcade version's made to like make you put quarters in. If anything, you'd expect the arcade version to be harder. This one is like super unforgiving. Like if I get past this one level in the next couple of tries here, it like that will be amazing. Like because this is just so hard. Okay, go over. I'm trying to really anticipate things here. Oh, come on, I can't go up. Now I have to run this way. Give myself as much space as possible. Go down, please. All right, go up. Oh my God. It wouldn't let me go up and then immediately it has the barrel come down. And like, that's the thing. Because of how slowly you ascend and how quickly they descend, you basically just have an RNG chance that you're just gonna die. Because of the fact that the barrel comes every 2 seconds and it takes 1.5 seconds to go up a ladder, you basically are just like 50-50 chance I go up here and I can make this. And Mario's jump is so short, I can't even dodge something by hopping. I have to hop over it, which again, like if the spacing just works out wrong, then you just lose in this version. Because in other versions, at least you could have gone up a ladder to try to avoid a double barrel, but in this version you cannot. There's no way you have enough speed to do that. So, oh my God. And even in the best case scenario, like, which is that you have enough space to run and jump, you don't always make it because it's so tight. This is a really, really unfair version. So, I would say this is probably the worst version we've seen today in a number of ways. It's interesting because like movement-wise, like responsiveness-wise, this feels a lot better than some of the other ones I played today. Like it really does feel like snappy by comparison to even the last one. But I would trade that for the collision of like a proper version any day. Like this is just this is the same problem I've had with a couple of these ports. Let's see if I can pause. No. Actually, is there a way to turn on a way to pause that way? No. No. Oh. The same number keeps calling me, and it's clearly spam. The same problem I've had with a number of these ports that have this collision issue is that basically that last corner is like a 95% chance you're gonna fail, and it has nothing to do with whether or not you have the ability to play this game or not, because that ladder is so close. Oh, come on. That ladder is so close to that corner. So if the barrel decides to go around the corner, you're dead, because you've already committed to trying to get to the ladder. And if one comes down the ladder, you're dead. So basically, you have to jump. You have to hope that the barrel goes down the ladder, that you jump that one, and are already headed up the ladder for the next one to come around, and you have to hope that that one doesn't come down the ladder. That's the only way that you could make it through here with the gap and spacing between the timings of these things. Because otherwise it's impossible. Because if you have 2 seconds to go between the two things, and it takes you 1.5 seconds to climb a ladder, so like let's count this. We can do this actually pretty well. So 1, 2, so yeah, about 1.5 seconds, and let's see how quickly Donkey Kong throws a barrel. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. So basically the same kind of timing I was saying. So if you have if you move upwards at about 2/3 of what his speed is for throwing, and that last bend, so you have a 1 second, maybe a 1 second window to climb the ladder and get up there. But here's the catch. You can be hit on the ladder from an object coming below you, which means that one coming around the corner. So you have to make sure you completely dodge the barrel before you even start climbing. Which means that that's an entire second lost. So I don't even know if it's actually possible without it giving you a perfect window. Oh, come on. Oh my god. And then of course this kind of thing happens. So because there's the other ladder, you just get setups where that wasn't possible. Like that because of the lack of spacing between the heights there's nowhere I could have sat on that ladder that wouldn't have killed me as far as I can tell. Or maybe if I sit here, okay. If I sit right at the end of the ladder and I get lucky and they don't have the barrel come down the ladder like that, then there's a chance that I could make it past. But otherwise it's not possible. So yeah, I'm gonna try this like 2 or 3 more times and then I'll move on. We have one more version that I can try on the Ocean Software versions. Oh, come on. Is that the end of the game? Okay, so we'll try one more set of lives and see where we can get. But yeah, this is a very unfair version. Like there's been only one other version I've played so far that also felt like it was impossible to get past the first level. And it was for this exact same problem. Basically, the speed of the barrels is just too fast, with the RNG making it effectively it's a prayer, like there. So I had to go up the ladder. If I didn't go up the ladder, then that barrel was gonna come at me and kill me. I could have maybe jumped that one, but then if I tried to jump that one and that one didn't come down that first ladder and instead went down the second ladder, then I would have just jumped into it. So I didn't have a choice there, basically. It was either it was like a 50-50 chance I was gonna get hit by the barrel coming down the first ladder or the second ladder. And so I had to take the option and hope that it just didn't go down either ladder. And unfortunately, it went down a ladder, and there was only a 1 in 3 chance that it wouldn't have. So this is what I'm saying, like, it is just unfair. There's no... And I'm just... Like, I'm trying to do all of the things I can to give myself the best chances here, but, like, it's so hard. I'll try one last time, and then we'll move on, because that felt pretty good in terms of getting close. But yeah, it's just basically like on any given setup, you basically have like either at best a 50-50 chance of getting past it, at worst a 1 in, I would say, 4 chance for that top one. This is like a 1 in 2 chance, so like or that was a 1 in 3 chance rather, because it's a ladder or it's the gap. Oh, come on. And there, I got a perfect hop where I hopped right before it would have hit me, and at a perfect hop, it still isn't enough to clear it. And I think that was a big problem. So I think that, to me, that's a bug. That the developers did not spend enough time to, like, figure out the collision for that. Or at least figure out, like, the hang time. Like, Mario's hang time should have been longer. So here, yeah, that's exactly what I was saying right there. So my only option was to take that ladder, because if I didn't take that ladder and I instead waited, there was another barrel coming behind. If I got lucky and I was up there, I can dodge the barrel that was coming down, which is what I did. But then if the other barrel had gone past me, I would have actually been able to try to jump that last barrel. But because it was set up the way it was, basically there was just no chance. Like that, there's like, I had a 50-50 chance it came down that ladder and killed me, and unfortunately, it was the one I chose heads and it chose tails and it killed me. But had I not done that and instead jumped that barrel, I might have survived for like a second, but then I wouldn't have had enough time to go up the ladder to dodge the third barrel that was coming. So I don't know. Like, I don't know if it's possible. I mean, theoretically, it's possible. I'll try one last time. Theoretically, it is possible, but it's like, it is a crapshoot. Like, this is not a skill-based thing at this point. This is just, I mean, it's skill to some degree because you need enough skill to like figure out when to pull off which maneuver. But at that one corner there, it's basically a coin toss. You either get a scenario you can dodge or you don't. Oh, come on, let me up the ladder. And obviously the precision of going up that ladder does not help with the scenario. It has such a small window where you actually can go up that it's about, like, I would say 3 pixels wide, which isn't like point precision, but it's darn close to it. And like right there, I was past it, and I didn't even know I was past it. Oh, okay. So go down. Okay. Please go past me. See, there. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So there is no way I could have gone up that ladder fast enough to have dodged the barrel. The movement of the barrels is just too fast to do that. You just have to go up the ladder and hope that it goes past you, and it's basically a coin toss. Do you survive or not? Like there. I got lucky that time. We'll see if I get lucky again, because I'm going to need to. Oh, come on. That sucks. Anyways, so you can see, like, even if this version has some of the other levels, like, let's see. It says it does have all of the levels in it, but that's basically pointless at this point because it's so hard. And it's not even, I say the word hard. What I mean is it's just unfair. Like difficulty, to me, something that's hard or something that's difficult implies that there's some skill involved. In this case, it's literally a coin toss. Once you get to that ladder, 50-50, toss a coin. Does the barrel come down the ladder or not? If it comes down the ladder, you're just dead. If it doesn't come down the ladder, you might be able to make it. Like, that's not hard, that's just bad. Like, it's just unfair. I hate difficulty like that in games because you know what you're supposed to do. You theoretically have the skill to pull it off. Like, I can make those jumps, I can make the time gaps, but I just have to hope that something doesn't randomly decide to come down and kill me. And like, to me, that's just stupid. Like, the Ocean Software in this case, or actually it was coded by Sentient Software. So Sentient Software in this case should have done a better job of like ensuring that that was not unfair. Like, I almost feel like it wasn't playtested at all. Like, they just built all of the levels, coded them in the game, made the physics what they were at the beginning, played through like maybe a quarter of one of the levels to make sure it worked, and then was like done and shipped it. Because I don't know anybody who would have done this whole thing and then got into that scenario and been like, this is totally acceptable, because that's so broken. Anyways, let's move on to the ZX Spectrum version, which is another tape loading version, but I should be able to do a fast load, which would be nice. Let's go load tape, Ocean Software. Now, what do I have to do for this one? I think so it should be this, and then enter. Okay, this is maybe not gonna work. I think fast loading is on. Yeah, okay, errored. I'm gonna have to do that again. Fast loading's on, I have to turn it off to start with. So let's reset. Tape loader. Go. Turn the core volume down while I'm loading the tape. Oh, maybe I did not load the tape in first. There we go. So here we go. We're loading another tape. This one actually shows you a visible representation of the audio signal, which is kind of interesting and cool. Once we're past this screen, which is like some kind of almost copyright protection screen or something, as far as I can tell here, then I can start doing the fast load. I just have to get past this, because this is where it seems to error out if I'm doing fast load. Okay, and I think, here we go. I think I can now turn fast load on. Yeah, there we go. Now you can already see that the color palette of this one's gonna be pretty off. But we'll see how this goes. All right. Oh, this might be the one that I cannot use the thing for, but we'll see. Okay, I'm gonna use my keyboard to start with. Keyboard, let's go 7 to define keys. Let's do, ooh, what is better? Maybe this, oh my God. Why is left first? Can I undo that? Right, down, up. Fire. I need to do that again because I screwed up the first key. 7, define keys. Let's go left. Oh, nope. Why is it not? Okay, it doesn't like these cursors. Okay, let's try this again. 7. Can I do it with my? No, it won't let me use my controller. Dang it. A, D, S, W. It's backwards from like every other mapper I've ever used, but for some reason Ocean Software does it this way. Okay, so this is the ZX Spectrum, which was extremely popular in Britain. Lots of things were made for this. Ocean Software, I believe, was a UK-based company, and it looks like this one's also coded by Sentient Software. So theoretically, these two versions should be pretty close to the same layout, but we'll see. This one looks a little bit worse. So far, there's only one color for everything. Oh, there's 2 colors on that one. Yeah, 1 color for Mario. Ooh, that jump is something else. Okay, but I can get the hammer. And it looks like they are coloring. So basically, it's a 1 color screen, and they can choose to color parts of the screen different colors at different times. Wow, this is unfair already. It looks like all the versions made by the same company have the same issue, where Donkey Kong just throws things way too fast. Okay, so let's go here, let's go up here. Come on, go up. There we go. I bet you the collision detection is very similar between these 2 versions as well. Come on. The movement speed of Mario going up the ladders is way too slow. Like, that is one fix they could have made to just potentially have fixed the other issues. If they were gonna make the barrels move as fast as they do, and have the collision box as big as it does. Oh yeah, and this version also doesn't have the bouncing wall effect. Wow, the precision for the ladders is brutal. If they were gonna do the hitboxes as bad as they were and the speed on the barrels as bad as they are, then they could have sped up Mario's movement speed vertically, and they didn't. I'm gonna try to use a joystick here. Let's try. I think Sinclair, maybe. And I'm gonna have to probably define the buttons, but we'll see. It might do it by default, hopefully, if the 4's set up that way. It does have this animation, which is nice, but the sound's way off. Okay, I do not have movement. Define, right, left, down, up, fire 1, fire 2, no. Okay. Let's try this. Edward Sinclair. Ah, there we go. Oh, much better. It's still hard, but this is gonna be way, way better. So now I'm using a controller. Okay. So again, Mario's jump and fall in this is way, way faster than the arcade version. It's at least double the speed, which makes it, again, like, it's just one of those things that just adds difficulty, makes the jumping way more precise. Climbing the ladders feels much slower, especially in comparison to how fast the barrels move. It does feel like they were able to borrow a lot of the code across these two versions, although graphically, obviously, they're very different. I would say that the precision of going up these ladders is worse, so that's a collision detection issue, probably. Okay. I can actually beat this one, maybe? Oh my god, the movement is so slow vertically. Oh my god! There's just no, like, the vertical movement speed is so bad. You can't, like, do anything. And I bet you, okay, I'm gonna try this here. I bet if I stand here, it's gonna kill me. Yeah. So I don't think that those, again, I think that this version has the same problem with the ladders. Graphically, this one's trying to emulate the same graphics as the last version. Like, it still has the same way of depicting Mario's lives. The sprites are pretty far off, but I think that's a necessity. Like, this one clearly has worse... God. This clearly has a worse graphics processing, not necessarily chip, but, like, program. Like, the way it's been programmed is clearly worse. Like, I know at this time, computers had like a couple of different ways that they could process graphics. One could be done through sprite rendering, which is how like consoles did it most of the time. One way was to do character rendering, so it was literally like a character set, like a font set effectively built in that you could like change out effectively the font to draw things onto the screen. And there's like other methods that used, like, man, it takes so long. Oh my god, it takes so long to climb up a ladder that basically you have to just commit, because you cannot wait for like a barrel coming from the layer above you and then trying to go around a bend is gonna come faster than it takes for you to climb up that ladder. So that's kind of stupid. Like, this is a really bad... This has the same issues I have with the other version. It's just like, the timing is so... Like, it's just random. Like, basically it's just 100% a crapshoot as to whether or not you can make any of this. I'll try one more time. But basically, like, I don't have high hopes for this. This one's actually worse than the other one in that... What makes it worse? I think Mario's jump speed here is even faster than the last one, which gives you an even narrower window, and the movement speed up the ladders in this one feels even slower than the last one. And those two factors just make this game a lot less playable. Like, look how long it takes. And because of that, like, oh my god. Like, I almost can't even make that. Like, that was like almost a full... Like, that was almost a full length of the screen for the barrel to move before I could move up that ladder. Which makes that, like, almost impossible, because you're gonna have 2 or 3 barrels potentially come down the ladder in the time that it takes you to go up the ladder. And so that just makes it, like, effectively impossible. Yeah, both of these versions I would rate as, like, a 1 out of 10. They may have all of the level in place, and they may have, like, at least a snappier feel to them than some of the other versions. They may have the background music in place, which some of the versions don't. But just gameplay-wise, these suck so much because they clearly did not playtest these for the timings of things, because like there's that was like an impossible setup right there. Like there's literally nothing I could have done. If I sat down that ladder, there's two 50-50 chances of barrels coming down that ladder, which is like a 75% chance or more that I'm gonna die just by sitting there. I couldn't have jumped past them because my jump is too slow, even though in the arcade version you would have been able to do that because you can actually jump 2 barrels. So basically, like, you're just screwed. Like, there's just nothing. You just coin tossed. Oh, I lost the setup because randomly they had the barrels come down a ladder at one point to put them right next to each other. Yeah, it's exactly. It's crazy. Like, in my opinion, Sentient Software, who coded these 2 versions, clearly did not put in the effort that some of these other versions did to get the gameplay to feel good. Like Coleco may have had versions that they made that had less of the mechanics, so they had fewer girders, one less level section, but in every case the mechanics felt pretty good. At least from like a fairness level, the ones from Coleco felt more fair, I would say. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch and make sure that that's 100% true, but like pretty much all of their versions felt pretty fair, even if they don't feel correct or they were missing a couple pieces. The Atari ones, more or less, were also pretty fair, although they did have 1 or 2 versions that had this same problem where the collision boxes were just too big and basically made it impossible. The Ocean Software ones seem to be across the board pretty bad for that, or at least specifically these 2 ones built by Sentient Software, the MSX version and the ZX Spectrum version. I can't speak to the Commodore 64 version yet because we need to find a way to load that one. The CPC one felt actually pretty good, and I don't think it was Sentient Software who developed that one. I don't think it said, or at least like it was very hard to tell. The Amstrad one was very, very accurate. It was really good, but these ZX Spectrum and the MSX so far are just not. Like, so this one is the ZX Spectrum. So I'm emulating it, sort of. Well, yeah, I am emulating it, but it's a hardware emulation on a MiSTer FPGA, which is not a console. It is a specification, which is sort of like how 3DO worked and how the CDI worked, where basically it was like a specification of like, if you put these parts together, it's a this. MiSTer is the same kind of idea, although in the case of the MiSTer project specifically, it does currently require, actually no, I think there is 1 or 2 other chips that works now, but the DE10 Nano, which is an FPGA, like a specific FPGA board, and it's the board is actually for developing CPUs and computer chips. So it's meant to be like a dev kit for building CPUs, but it just happens to be that this one is affordable enough that a community got around it and built like basically specifications to write cores from existing hardware into it. So in this case, the core itself gets written to like with the transistors. Like basically, you can write the transistors into the FPGA so that it is actually equivalent to the hardware that these things are emulating. So theoretically, you can plug in, like, it's reading the ROMs as though it was reading a cartridge ROM, because cartridges are just ROMs on a cartridge, right? So like, there's not like a special hardware. Well, I mean, there's different chips and whatnot, but it's still effectively software that's sitting onto on a cartridge. So this is as close to like running it off of the actual hardware as possible without actually running off the hardware, because like, actually the ZX Spectrum is one of the few consoles I don't own, or one of the few computers I don't own, but most of these ones I do. Actually, yeah, like the VIC-20, which I wasn't able to get working last time, but I'm going to try to again next time. Like, I have one sitting there, but like, it's just a pain in the ass to set up all different things to get this to work. So it's much easier for me to just put them all on this guy and like have this emulator thing run it. Also, it's just safer because a lot of these things are so old now that I'm just worried that I'm going to damage it just by turning it on, because like a lot of the old capacitors could be leaking. and things like that. So this is a safer way to preserve the actual hardware that I own, and still run basically the equivalent to them. There's some differences, like the fact that I can use an Xbox controller or whatever to play these things is an advantage of this, but also the disadvantage is setting up this system is not easy. Like the initial setup is quite challenging because it's really it's a community of people who are trying to get things to be as accurate as possible, but it also means it's all hobbyists and stuff like that. It's not officially supported. So unfortunately, but yeah, so this is a ZX Spectrum running on the MiSTer hardware, which is the D10 Nano. So there are some niceties that like the community has put in place, and this is like part of the MiSTer layer that like basically there's like a layer that the community builds this stuff for, that is the MiSTer project. And so there's a couple of things that you can get that get built into that. And some of the people who make their core, like the cores set up for the different machines, have added extra stuff to that layer. So in this case, I can like choose to have a mouse, or turn on off the tape sound, apparently. Turn on fast load, which I didn't have on the MSX version. I can change the CPU speed, which will highly destroy how the game is played. But yeah, so yeah, it's the difference between like this versus like a ROM cartridge. So a ROM cartridge, you play like a ROM cartridge, like the what's it, like the Evercarts are a hardware, are basically just like a hardware interface for the ROM software off of a different medium. So it still plays on true hardware. This is not true hardware, but it's pretty darn close because somebody has coded all of the chips for the hardware onto a die, basically. So do I manually reset? So basically, if I want to change the core to a different core, I go into this menu and I can go to cores, and now I can choose like these are all the computer cores. There's arcade cores, console cores. So when I was playing the arcade Donkey Kong, I went into here and I went down to the Donkey Kong one, and then I have the Donkey Kong arcade cores that are built into this. And like this is a list of cores, but and they're referred to as a core, but truly most of these things are many different chips all together, because like most of the consoles past like the early stuff and many of the computers, you have like a separate GPU and a separate CPU. And so basically on this FPGA, they've just like set up sections effectively that are like, this is the GPU and this is the CPU and this is it doing the thing. Like I don't know 100% exactly how they work because I don't know hardware. Like I don't know programming hardware that well, but it's somewhere in that realm. So it's effectively taking all of the different chips, deconstructing how they work, rebuilding them onto this, and then putting them all together so that they all run. And that's effectively what people are doing, is basically like reverse engineering or finding the specs sheets for the original cores and then putting them on this, as like basically a piece of software tells the cores how to orient themselves so that they are in the right setup to be exactly or as close to as possible as the original hardware. And then the MiSTer layer is a layer between that that then helps take some of those signals, convert them to like a USB signal so that I can use a USB controller, use an HDMI signal so I can run this off my monitor and through the streaming card. So the MiSTer project itself is like a layer in there that helps interface the cores that are being built or reconstructed, and the playability. And one of the big advantages of this, which I don't have because I just don't have a need for it right now, is that you can get like other. So the DE10 Nano is basically a board that has like the DE10 Nano on it, or the DE10 FPGA on it. I can't remember exactly what the name of the chip, but basically the FPGA chip on it, and it has basically an Arduino built into it as well. So you can interface different Arduino boards on it. So there are one specifically built for MiSTer. So in this case, I have just an extra USB board attached so that I can have more USB ports because I don't want to use micro USB, which is the default on the board for some stupid reason. The worst possible connector type. So I have another board that plugs in and then gives me just like a whole bunch of USB regular types. So I can plug in basically anything. So I have a USB keyboard, a tiny USB keyboard I'm using to interface with some of these computers that I need to use. And I have my 360 controller. I could put in some more stuff. I also plugged in a fan because the default just doesn't have any fan, which like the rated temperature for the FPGA core is actually really, really high, but the fan just helps a little bit. And then I did put a RAM chip in because some of these cores do require more RAM than what is on the actual chip thing. But the one thing I don't have, so there's another board that's people most of the time get, which is an analog output board. So you can just plug it straight into the top of this board and it outputs to analog signals completely. And so you like it gives you an almost perfect emulation of true hardware because you can get true analog out to whatever you need to get out to, and you can put special connectors on to use original controllers as well, which is pretty awesome. But I haven't done it because it's an extra, like it's actually quite expensive to do all of this. Like the initial board cost is quite high, and then all of these other pieces cost extra money. So I tried to go as cheap as possible just to get something going. But yeah, it's a pretty cool thing, but it takes quite a bit of setup. Like especially some of these are way worse than others. So the computer stuff is all really brutal. Finding anything that works, trying to figure out how they work, like it's very not well documented. So like most of these I had to like just try a whole bunch of stuff, go through old forums of like how did these computers actually run the software, because there's not really good documentation around this stuff. And some of them are like, well, you have to look up the manual for the software that you want to run if you want to load the thing. And it's like, oh great, how do we find that? So then I had to go online and search for like for example, which one's the one that uses it? So the Amstrad CPC version of Donkey Kong has a manual that's like you type in run quotation mark and then Kong. That's not correct. I found that out because I tried it a whole bunch of times and it just never worked. And so I was like, well, what could it possibly be? And so I started looking at forums of like, how do you load software on an Amstrad CPC? And eventually I found something that's like, if you use this, you can check to see what is contained within like a floppy disk. And I was like, oh great. So then I typed in that command and it's like, oh, so there's something in here that says donkey. There's nothing in here that says Kong. So maybe if I type run quote donkey, maybe that will work. And it did. But like, this is all stuff that you just kind of have to try because there's not like good documentation for any of this. The arcade stuff, better. The console stuff, hit and miss. Some of it's easy, some of it's really challenging. It depends if the BIOS is included in the way that the like component circuitry worked or not. And some of the BIOSes are split into like tons of parts, and then getting all that data is very, very challenging. So this is not for the faint of heart. I would not like wholeheartedly recommend that anybody get this thing, because like it isn't for everybody. It's definitely like a challenge, but it is very cool. And I'm also like somebody who, again, going back to like some of the first time I mentioned this console, but like, which was a couple videos ago, I own many cartridges of Donkey Kong for many consoles, and I own many, many consoles and many computers. I've done pretty close to my due diligence to make sure that what I'm doing is 100% legit. I wouldn't recommend this to somebody who doesn't have any of that stuff, because I just don't agree with that from a personal standpoint. Now, if you have all that and you're really into the setup process that this takes, it's great. once you figure it out and you get it working. But again, I would not recommend it to everybody, and it's in a gray area legally for a lot of reasons, but I've done as best a job as I can with my collection to ensure that what I'm doing with these videos specifically is legitimate, as best as I can. Like, there are some exceptions. I can't go and buy a Donkey Kong arcade unit, although I do have an arcade machine and it has Donkey Kong on it, and I bought it legitimately. I can't guarantee that that's a legitimate ROM or whatever. Like, I bought it. It's legitimate, but yeah, I'm not going to go and buy like an original Donkey Kong machine because I don't know how many thousands of dollars and how much space that would take up. But I've tried to do my best. Yeah, so those are the Ocean Software versions that I could play. So I didn't get the Commodore 64 version going. Let's take a look at. Let's go forward in time. So these are all from about 1983 to 1986, it looks like, or somewhere in that era. So this is all in the second generation period of time. All of the ones that we saw today, except and like the Donkey Kong original machine was, what was the original year of Donkey Kong? Hold on a second here. 81. So yeah, early. So 81 is technically still during the first generation of consoles, or it's like right in that gap right between the first and second gen. Or wait, hold on. First generation ended in 78. So no, so Donkey Kong the arcade machine would have come in the very early stages of the second generation. Which as we've been going through these versions, you will have noticed, like, actually, this is a good time to explain. I believe there really were two generations that happened within what we currently are calling the second generation. I think this needs to be completely reframed in the industry, and I think that we need to we need to come up with better labels for how we determine generations, and I think we need to do a better job of tracking generations from a standpoint that makes more sense. In the early days, the way that generations were kind of determined was based on the crashes and the cycles of the industry, which only really works for the first three generations because there wasn't a crash after the third generation. So from that point forward, we decided new generations were based on, like, sort of like chipsets, or like, to some degree, the second, third, fourth generation were sort of determined by the bits that the CPU was capable of processing to some degree. But even that's not 100% accurate. And if you look at like the 2600 version, the 2600 compared to the 5200, you can see there's like a huge gap in terms of the quality of these visuals. So like, actually, let's open the 2600 version again to see. Oh, I don't need to go back to cores. I need to load Donkey Kong. So here's 2600 version of Donkey Kong. Look at the graphics of this, right? This thing is considered second generation, which makes sense because first generation was Pong consoles. Now, all the computers we saw today are clearly well beyond this, and that's because computers at the time were just more capable machines. And that's been true in and out of different cycles, but very much true here. Like, this is very, very low quality. Now, if we go and we open ColecoVision, and we take, so this is not a perfect example because Coleco wrote both of these games, and to some people, they think that Coleco purposefully did a bad job of some of the ports. But it is also like, if you see other games across these consoles, which I'll show at some point, in a different video, the graphics capabilities of these two consoles is night and day. Like, what I'll show you in a second here. Now let's see which one of these is right. Here. So this is still not as good as some of the ports we've seen today, but like, you can't tell me that these are in the same console generation. Like, this is just nowhere close. The quality of the graphics is so much higher. The sound reproduction is way higher. The feel of it is so much better. Like, it feels like the arcade version a lot closer. Now, it doesn't have some of the animations and whatnot, but like... So, these are both considered second-generation consoles, and I'm like, there's not really a way that that could be true. These are so vastly different. And the fact that... And here's the other thing. The fact that Atari made two consoles in this second generation, to me, speaks to the fact that there were definitely two generations here. And this is where, like, one of the reasons I wanted to go over these comparisons, because I wanted to make a case for the fact that, like, there's just no way. like we should really be reframing this. We decided that the second generation was one whole generation because there was a crash at the beginning and a crash at the end. But if you look at the capabilities of these machines, it's not even close. Like, the Intellivision, which to my... in my opinion, is the closest, let's see if I can grab the Intellivision version again. Here we go. Intellivision. Load. Donkey Kong. So, Coleco made this version as well, and Intellivision, or Mattel, who owns Intellivision, was very unhappy. Oh no, I shouldn't have put two. Reset. What is one? No, I don't want two. Hold on. I gotta remember what I put in for one. Okay, it's this button. So, this version is still better than the 2600 version. It has more colors. It sounds better. The graphics are better, although not great. Now, Mattel says that this could have been made much better, and there is a case to be said that that is true, but whether or not Coleco intentionally made this version like that much worse than their version, I can't say is 100% like they intentionally did it. They had a very short time frame to make these games, and they developed for their own hardware, so they knew how that worked, and then this is like somebody else's hardware that they basically just had to hack to figure out how to make it work, because it wasn't like officially licensing the hardware at this time period. People like didn't intend for third-party developers to make stuff for their hardware. So although you could theoretically make a better version of Donkey Kong than this version on this console, I can't necessarily say that they intentionally made this one this much worse. But this is definitely better than the 2600 version. And I would say it's closer to the ColecoVision version than the 2600 version. But, like, yeah, I just don't... I can't... Like, putting the ColecoVision and the 2600 in the same generation to me are just, like... It just doesn't make sense. This one could arguably fit in either generation, but I do think that we need to describe there being two actual generations there. And, I mean, so, again, going back to... So, if I go to... Now, the 5200 never got a Donkey Kong version, because Coleco chose not to give it to the 5200 because they knew that the hardware that the ColecoVision ran, or that the 5200 ran on, was capable of, like, at least competing with the ColecoVision. And that's because, if you know the history of the 5200, the 5200 is literally the Atari 400, basically almost identically shoved into a box. And then, which one is it? It's load cart, this one. So theoretically, I mean, this version was made by Atari. So again, this is showing what Atari could do with their hardware at their best, effectively. Comparing this to the ColecoVision, which was the Coleco's best iteration that they could pull off. And you can see it's similar. It's not that far off. Each one has kind of its advantages and disadvantages. But this is effectively what the 5200 was capable of, because the 5200 is basically, they took the 400 computer, which is effectively what this is running on right now, and just shoved it into a huge box and sold it at basically the cost of what it cost to buy a computer at the time, which was like twice the price of a console. But graphically, you can see like this is way beyond the 2600. And so the fact that Intellivision and ColecoVision were such a threat to Atari that they built a second console in this generation, sort of, to me speaks again to the fact that, like, I think we need to separate out these. There needs to be a separation of generations between when the 2600 was released and when the 5200 was released. There needs to be a division there, and we need to call this a second and third generation, not a second generation and then being the NES as the third generation, because it's just not close. Like that, what we just saw was so far beyond the 2600, and like the 2600 is only one example of these early ones. Like the Channel F is another good example of a console from that generation, and I'll show these all in some point in the future. But I don't have Donkey Kong on all of them because Donkey Kong wasn't on all of them. But I just wanted to use Donkey Kong as like a starting point for this discussion, and then I'll go into the to each version later, each different console, and like how it was matching up in this generation in the future. But it just, yeah, it's not even close. So let's look at so we looked at Atari's versions in the previous one, and there I just showed you a little bit of the 5200 or the 400, 800 computer, Atari computers. That was Atari's build. And we saw one of Coleco's versions, and we saw a bunch of Ocean Software today. So let's end by looking at some of the Nintendo built versions. And this gets really interesting. So, a fun fact, the Nintendo Famicom was built with the intent to build a console that could run Donkey Kong, the arcade game. I find this very interesting for a number of reasons. One, it shows you how much more advanced arcade machines were to the consoles at the time. Two, the version we ended up getting, now I think, hold on. This is the Japan version. I'm going to turn the volume on this cord down. That's right. Okay. So, we have a different opening screen with like a little jingle we don't have on the other versions so far, or at least the ones we've seen today. The sound effects are pretty damn close to the arcade version, if not identical. Graphically, pretty damn close to identical to the arcade version. In fact, let's see if I can get the aspect ratio to be closer. None of these do anything helpful. That's not bad, but I think that this is closer to what a CRT would look like, in my opinion. That's more square. Okay. So, this is, yeah, now the barrels look exactly round rather than squashed or stretched. This is gameplay graphically, so gameplay-wise, this feels pretty near identical to the actual arcade version. Graphically, it looks pretty close to the arcade version. However, none of the cutscenes, or at least most of the cutscenes, don't exist. The girders do not quite have the amount of detail that the arcade version has. So, if you've played NES, which most people have, at least seen or played some ports of things, this isn't even close to what the NES is really truly capable of graphically. Like, this is this doesn't even have a background image. It's still black because it's trying to get to the arcade version. Sure, I get it. But also, like, you can pull off more than what they pulled off here. And not only that, but unlike some of the computer ports, this also only has 3 of the 4 levels in it. So not only is this not fully graphically the same as the arcade version, which it theoretically, if you've seen other NES games, could be, it also is missing a whole level. So my question is why? Because clearly the NES is capable of it, but they just didn't do it. And now there are several versions made for the NES era. So this is the Famicom version, which was a cartridge version. They also made a Famicom Disk System version, which is closer to what the NES is capable of, although a little bit better. Because in Japan, the NES came out after the Famicom Disk System was launched, but they still didn't incorporate all of the technology from it into the Western version of the console. But there were things that like the NES is still, I think, better than the Famicom in some places without the disk system. So yeah, arcade machines until like very recently have always been much superior to consoles. And especially it was especially true from like the dawn of the arcade and the dawn of the console generations up until the like mid 90s. That was very, very true. So like Pac-Man, for example, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, what's another good example of this era? Frogger. All those things, like, were not... You could not have a console at the time that would be capable of pulling them off as mechanically or graphically to the same degree that you could get in an arcade machine for, like, many years. Like, as I said, Donkey Kong was made in 81, and the Famicom came out in, what was it, like, 89 or something? Like 88? Somewhere in there. So, this is a console that came out, like, almost 10 years later, like 6 to 8 years later. And it's still not capable of completely replicating the arcade machine. So, they were better because an arcade machine was custom built to run a specific thing. So they could they built custom built boards for every single game. Well, for most part. They end up reusing a lot of that tech in a lot of games as they went down the road. But early games were custom built for spec on those machines, so they could choose, okay, we're gonna buy up these CRTs. These CRTs are capable of this frame rate. They're capable of this like number of pixels on screen. And then they could build their whole hardware around that. And then they could spec, like, okay, like, and knowing that they could sell a single arcade unit for like more than $1,000 or whatever, compared to like a console, which you're selling at a loss or close to a loss most of the time, and then the games themselves are only, like, at this time period, like maybe $100 or so. If adjusted for inflation, maybe like $150-ish. You're not making anywhere near the same margin, or you can't expect to make anywhere near the same margin on it. So they could put a lot more effort and money into making the specs for the arcade machines better. So, yeah, that's why arcade machines were just vastly superior at the time. They could put in as much RAM as they needed to get what they wanted to be done. Whereas consoles, they typically had like certain amounts of specifications that they were trying to get as minimum specs so that they could get the most built for the cheapest price that would still do what they wanted to do. So yeah. To me, the weird thing is, now I think that this is because, well, so I'm gonna get into this in a second. So we've seen a couple of the levels here. So let's go So that was the cartridge version for the Famicom. This is the disk system version for the Famicom. Okay. Yep. Okay. Coloration's a bit different. Otherwise, there's a lot of similarities between the two versions. Let's see if I can find a list of all the differences. So... Oh, I didn't get the points for that. Oh. Oh yeah, I can pause this. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so the points when scored are orange instead of white, which is one of the main, just right there, you can see it got, instead of white text, there was like an orangey yellow text. I think that this version was built after the Famicom and NES versions. And the Famicom version is the same version that was later ported to the NES. So if we look at, I have the NES version here. That's the e-reader version. This is the one. So we go back into this one. Yeah, they basically kept like a lot of the sound effects from these versions into like a ton of stuff later. Also, in my opinion, the background music to sound effect volumes in this is much better, and you can see like how much more forgiving those jumps are compared to the computer versions we were playing today. Like, I jumped right before that barrel hit me. I didn't even quite make the jump properly, and I still survived that first jump. Let's see what the text color is when we jump something here. Yeah, so white. So I believe that the Famicom version, the cartridge version, was pulled over to North America almost exactly. I think there might be some slight differences between the two. They added, so there was something that they added that was not in the arcade version, which is that intro song at the intro screen. So if I reset this one, this was not in the arcade version, because at the arcade version they would have it silent until somebody come and put money in the machine, and then the sound would kick in, because otherwise it would be super annoying. There is a darker color palette overall, and this is just a limitation of how the NES works. Basically you have to choose a palette that everything works within, and so whatever palette they built for this, it's like this was the best set that they could find that represented the colors as much as they could. The girders in this don't have the two tones, it's just the one tone, so that it's not graphically quite there. Now, the reason I find this really interesting, first of all, they specifically stated they built this console to play this game. Why doesn't it fully work? Secondly, they may have had the excuse that it just didn't fit on the RAM or whatever at the time, or on the ROM, or maybe the cartridge wasn't big enough or whatever at the time, but the NES has many sizes of cartridge. This is on the smallest. It didn't have to be. When they brought it to North America, it was several years later, because the NES didn't come out for a couple of years here. They easily could have, and there were games that came out with a twice as large ROM cartridge. So why didn't they? Like, if the whole point of this console was to be able to perform what Donkey Kong was able to do, why did they not do it? Because it's not like it would be cannibalizing arcade sales at this point. We're talking about 8 or 9 years after the arcade version had come out. So yeah, it was still popular. Yes, it was probably still making some money, but it's not, at this point, it's not going to be cannibalizing those sales. So it's kind of weird to me that this console was built around playing this game, and yet they just did not get it there. Like, oh, one of the other things, the how high can you get screen, or whatever it's called, doesn't exist in this version. It only exists. It exists in some of the computer versions. It exists in a couple of the other console versions. It doesn't exist in this version. So there's like they dropped a level. They don't have the animation where Donkey Kong climbs up the thing and knocks all the girders in place. They don't have a bunch of the animations like that. Some of the colors are not quite there. I just think that's really weird because it's not that the NES couldn't pull that off. I believe that the NES could have pulled that off, but they just didn't do it. Now, this version is more or less the same version that would be used for everything else. So my NES Classic, the current version that's on the Nintendo Online NES, all that is basically this ROM. We can look at the e-reader version, and you can see right away, no 2-player, so there was some changes made to this version. I don't know exactly what was changed. I've never played this version. I don't think they had bigger fish to fry necessarily when they were replicating it. I think they just didn't want to cannibalize the arcade, if anything. I don't know. Because, like, think about Super Mario Bros., right? It came out in North America, I think, like a year after this game, or maybe even the same year this game was released. It's way better graphically than this game is. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me that they couldn't have pulled it off. I just don't think... I think that they were concerned that they would kind of cannibalize some of the arcade sales, and so they didn't want to get a perfect replication of it. But to me, what's weird is that every future version of Donkey Kong that's appeared on any console has been this port. Because Nintendo hasn't licensed out their IP since basically this era. So we have not really had a true arcade-level Donkey Kong experience. Except for, I think they have the Arcade Classics Donkey Kong game on the eShop or something like that. But, like, almost every single port they've ever made of Donkey Kong since this era has been a inferior port to the original. And it's crazy to me that that's the case, because they could easily have remedied that by now. It's not like they couldn't have just copied the original now. I'm sure that altering this one to be identical to the original today would be probably pretty quick, given current hardware specifications and everything else. But they haven't done it. They finally gave us the Arcade Classics version, like, I don't know, a couple of years ago when they did the Arcade Classics version, but, like, that's crazy. It's insane to me that this version, which is clearly inferior to the original version, is the version that we've been stuck with every single time they've ported it. So this is the eShop version, the e-reader version, which was like the first version that showed up on the Game Boy Advance, I think? Was it the Game Boy Advance that had the e-reader? I think it was. And then the Game Boy Advance later got a NES Classic Series port as well. And this one actually has a better animation here. So this e-reader version is slightly better than the NES port, which is weird, or at least not necessarily just better, because it removes the 2-player options, and also the barrels are oddly split. Like, there's some weird problems with the sprites in this version, it looks like, in how they're split. It looks like they have to have 2 sprites for every sprite or something weird, which is why there's a line in there, maybe? I'm not sure. But there's clearly some changes to it that are not quite perfect. But, like, this version is the version that you see on, like, the NES Classic Game Boy Advance version is this. The NES, all of anything that says NES version is going to be this version, which is an inferior version to the arcade, and it's even inferior version to one of the other versions they have, which is the Famicom Disk System version, which has at least got different lettering coloring when you jump things. This is the wrong coloring for the score lettering. So that's also weird, right? Like it just doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. Now, like, this isn't a terrible version. It's pretty good. Mechanically it feels very good, but the fact that it misses one whole stage and it's missing a whole bunch of animations to me is crazy. That they haven't, like, for more than a decade, they didn't give us the arcade version. They just gave us this version, and this was the only version you get. So Game Boy has a weird version. So one that I'm not going to show you today is the Game Boy Donkey Kong, because it's kind of a unique game in that it's more like a true platformer, but in it is also the stages for this game. But for the NES, the Game Boy Advance, the current Switch, although other than the version that's in the eShop, I think like the Wii U, I think, had a version. All of those versions were just this version, which is, again, it's the inferior version. So it's weird. I don't know why they decided, like, I don't know if there's some licensing problem, but that to me doesn't make much sense. Although maybe, I know that there was some weird thing about the code because it was, I think, partially written by somebody else, and so they were in a legal dispute over that. But why didn't they then just remake it with, like, just take this code and rebuild the original version with this code? Because there's only a few things they'd have to code into it, because this is pretty darn close to exact. Yeah, like, it just, to me, it's crazy that they didn't do that. Do I have any other versions of it that I could show right now? I have one other version I think I can show, which is not in NES. The game... No, I don't have the actual Donkey Kong version for that Game & Watch. So I can't do that one. Actually, do I have the Game Boy Advance version? I think I do. Game Boy Advance. I believe I got this one. So if I load the Game Boy Advance, yeah, so here's the Donkey Kong, yeah, Classic Series. So we'll take a look at this. So this is, the aspect ratio is a little off. The music sounds pretty much identical. Yeah, okay. Just want to quickly look at this. Okay, so the coloration in this one's different. So this is a slightly different port than the other one, but interesting. Yeah, I'll probably head out for dinner as soon as you leave as well, but yeah, so this version is different. So we'll have to take a look at this in more detail in the future. So there are some slight differences, and like, I guess the e-reader version compared to this version is quite different. It looks like the e-reader version is closer to the NES version, whereas this one is like maybe a custom-built port. And then there's some other versions that I could eventually get, but I don't have. So there's still like 5 or 6 versions that I can get access to, but haven't found a way to get running perfectly yet. So we'll look at that in the future. But yeah, that's a pretty good look at like some of the different versions. That's like most of the versions at this point, and it just shows you like the different capabilities of the systems in these eras. Yeah, I just think that's pretty cool. I'm not sure what I'm going to move on to after this. Probably more of a comparison between like all the second-gen consoles and what they're truly graphically capable of. I'm going to use like a bunch of different games that I have as ways to compare, like Galaga, Dig Dug, and Donkey Kong as primary comparison points, so we can kind of see a better gradient of like how the graphics actually were capable of performing across these different consoles. But this at least gives you a taste of how quite different the hardware was from one another. Yeah. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'm going to one day compile this information into a more like specific video comparing each of the versions and like how each console and thing was like, basically to get a better sense of like where the console generation was truly at, and like how there's probably like we really do need to rethink this generation specifically, and how this was like basically the major shifting point for the industry as a whole, and has basically turned into this, if anything, this game is why our industry exists in the way that it does today. Given the fact that its importance in Nintendo creating its own console, how like consoles became dominant at different points in the industry in the second generation based on their ports of this game. A lot of things like this is like the truly defining point in video games in a lot of ways, in just basically determining the trajectory and like the way that the industry ended up working. Like there's people will talk about like the Nintendo certification process and how that helped prevent another crash and things like that, and those are all good points, but in terms of like the actual design mentality, the like the licensing, the performance, and the like the defining like what is different between like an arcade version and a console version and the way that those should be treated. This is the game that kind of like helped, that really kind of set that bar. Pac-Man's obviously also a big contributing factor, but this one really, I think, just based on all the licensing issues and other things that happen around it. So I'll probably turn this into a true video at some point, as like a properly edited thing, but it might take me a while. It's a lot of work to write that all out properly and get all the research in perfect order. But I wanted to get at least a sense of how each game worked and how the performance was different across all of them, and get a sense of like what was capable in this era, and where things were at. So anyways, thanks for watching. I will see you